Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Daniel was awakened at 3:15 a.m. by the gentle but urgent shaking of his son Alex. 8-year-old Alex stood beside his bed, his little face looking unusually serious in the moonlight. "Daddy," Alex said in a lowered voice, "we need to get out of the backyard now." Daniel immediately came to his senses. As a former Army Corps of Engineers, he'd learned to trust his instincts and warning signs in all situations. Alex had never been a kid who liked to cause trouble. Instead, he possessed a sense of observation and judgment beyond his years. "What happened?" Daniel asked softly while instinctively looking to his side. Sarah's spot was empty and the sheets were still a little warm, indicating that she hadn't been gone long. "Mom's not home," Alex said, "but someone's in the backyard. I saw a flashlight light through the window." Daniel's wife, Sarah, works as a night nurse and often has to deal with emergencies. But tonight she was supposed to be home because she told him there were no night shifts scheduled this week. This small conflict sets off alarm bells in Daniel's mind. 3-year-old Emma rolled over in her cot, making soft murmuring noises. Daniel gently touched her forehead, then signaled Alex to be quiet. They needed to figure out what was going on, but first they needed to make sure the kids were safe. "Okay, buddy," Daniel whispered. "Let's play a quiet game. Help me pick up Emma, and we'll go into the living room and see what's going on." Alex nodded and carefully picked up his sleeping sister with his impressive maturity. Daniel noticed no fear in his son's movements, only focus and alertness. The boy had clearly inherited his observational skills and Sarah's ability to think calmly. They quietly walked toward the living room window. Daniel pulled back a corner of the curtain and peered into the backyard. In the moonlight, he did see moving points of light that looked like someone with a flashlight checking the back door and windows of the house. This wasn't a random burglary. This person's movements were too purposeful, too familiar with the layout of the house. Daniel's military training allowed him to immediately assess the threat level. Unknown intruder, familiar with the layout of the house, choosing to act at a time when the family should be asleep. These factors combined to paint a disturbing picture. "Alex," he whispered, "remember the emergency procedures I taught you? Remember, if there's danger, we go to the garage and drive to Uncle Mike's." "Good. Now I need you to do me a favor. Take Emma to the garage and start the car, but don't drive away. Wait for my signal." A flicker of concern flashed in Alex's eyes, but he didn't argue. "Dad, are you going to be okay?" "It will be, buddy. I just have to make sure of a few things." Daniel watched his son carry Emma toward the garage, and a surge of protectiveness surged through him. No matter who was in his backyard, no matter what they wanted, Daniel wasn't going to let anyone hurt his children. He took his Glock 19 pistol from the safe in his bedroom, one of the few pieces of equipment he'd kept since retiring from the military. Carrying a gun for self-defense is legal in Austin, Texas, and Daniel makes sure he always complies with all relevant laws and regulations. Through the glass of the back door, Daniel saw a tall figure checking the lock. The man clearly knew what he was doing, and his movements were so well-trained that he barely made any noise. More worryingly, the man seemed to be familiar with the house's security system, as he easily avoided all motion sensors. Daniel's cell phone vibrated at that moment, revealing a text message from Sarah. "Emergency. At the hospital dealing with a car accident victim. Probably won't be home until morning. Sorry I didn't tell you ahead of time." The timestamp on the message showed it had been sent 3 minutes ago. But Daniel knew that if Sarah was really in the hospital, she wouldn't be texting at this time, much less in such a formal tone. In their 12 years of marriage, Sarah never said things like, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you beforehand." She would say, "Sorry, honey," or "Sorry, something came up." The text was meant to give someone an excuse for Sarah to be away. Daniel's blood began to flow fast, but he forced himself to stay calm. Military training had taught him to think systematically when confronted with a threat, rather than being overwhelmed by emotions. He needed more information to understand what was happening. He crept back into the bedroom and opened Sarah's dresser drawer. At the bottom, tucked under a pile of old photographs, he found something he'd never seen before. A new credit card statement showing a large number of expenses in recent months that Daniel hadn't been aware of. Hotel charges, expensive restaurants, and even a few merchants he can't identify. Even more shocking, he found a small notebook with some strange dates and times, as well as some coded information. Daniel recognized some of the dates. Those were the days he traveled or attended weekend military reserve training. On the last page of the notebook, he saw today's date, underneath which was written, D out, M in, 3:30 a.m. Final. The D was obviously Daniel. Who was the M? And what did final mean? The sounds in the backyard came closer. Daniel heard a slight metallic scraping sound, like someone picking a lock. He immediately realized that this wasn't a random burglary, but a premeditated one. And Sarah's disappearance and the unnatural text message suggested that she had either been kidnapped or was involved in this plan against him. Daniel was reluctant to consider the other possibility, but the evidence was pointing more and more toward a frightening conclusion, that Sarah might be involved in this plan against him. His cell phone vibrated again, this time with a message from Alex. Dad, the car is ready and Emma is still sleeping. The guys in the backyard went to the side door. Daniel was proud of his son's calmness and observational skills, even under the circumstances. Alex had clearly inherited his military instincts and Sarah's medical precision, a combination that was invaluable in dangerous situations. Daniel heard the side door handle turn. Whoever was trying to get into his house, they were on the move now. He needed to make a decision, stay and face this threat, or take the children and flee. Military training had taught him that without knowing the enemy's numbers and equipment, retreating was usually the wisest option, especially when there were civilians, in this case his children, who needed protection. But Daniel also knew that if he ran away now, he might never be able to figure out what was going on or who was threatening his family. He made his decision. Daniel quietly walks to the garage and quickly dials 911 on the way. When the operator answered, he whispered, "This is 1247, Maple Street. Someone forced into my house. I'm in the garage with my 2 small children and need police backup." "Yes, sir. The police are on their way. Can you make sure you and your children are safe?" "Can. We are ready to leave the scene." Daniel ended the call and walked into the garage. Alex was in the driver's seat, and although he obviously couldn't reach the pedals, he had the car keys in the ignition. Emma was still asleep in her seat in the back seat. "Good job, buddy," Daniel said softly. "Now we're getting out of here." As he started the engine, Daniel heard voices coming from the house. Someone was searching and didn't care much about making noise. This was further confirmation that this wasn't a professional burglary, but something else. As they drove out of the driveway, Daniel saw a tall figure appear at the front door. In the light of the street lamps, he was able to make out the silhouette of the man, about 6 feet tall, stocky, and wearing dark clothing. More importantly, the man seemed to recognize their car because when he saw them drive away from, he immediately turned and ran to another car parked on the street. Daniel accelerated toward his brother Mike's house while watching in his rearview mirror for anyone following. Mike was a retired Marine living in a safe neighborhood on the other side of town. If there was any place that could provide temporary shelter, it was Mike's home. During the drive, Daniel's cell phone continued to receive text messages from Sarah. "Where are you guys? Why is the garage door open? Daniel, answer me. I'm worried. Please tell me you're all okay." The tone of the messages gradually changed from concerned to almost hysterical, but Daniel noticed one detail. Sarah never asked about the intruder. If she really worked at the hospital, if she was truly concerned about her family's safety, her first question should have been to ask if anyone had broken into the house. Instead, she seems mostly concerned about where Daniel and the kids are. Daniel decides to test his theory. He replied, "There was someone in the house. We got out safely. The police have been called." Sarah's reply comes quickly. "What? There's someone in the house. Are you guys okay?" But the reply was too short. If Sarah was actually at the hospital dealing with an emergency, she wouldn't have replied so quickly, and her response seemed more like a role play than genuine shock and concern. When they arrive at Mike's house, Daniel's brother immediately comes out to greet them. Mike was a cautious man. His house had a well-developed security system, and he had experience in handling crisis situations. "What happened?" Mike asked, helping Daniel carry a sleeping Emma into the house. Daniel briefly explained the situation, including his suspicions about Sarah's behavior. As Mike listened, his expression turned serious. "It sounds like someone is playing a dangerous game," Mike said, "and Sarah may know more than she's admitting." "I don't want to believe this," Daniel said, "but evidence. Evidence is evidence," Mike interrupted. "And on the battlefield, if the intel points in a certain direction, you can't ignore it because of personal feelings." Alex sat on the couch, And although he pretended to be watching TV, Daniel knew he was listening to the adults' conversation. The boy was always watching, always learning. Daniel's cell phone rang again, this time with Sarah's name on the caller ID. He looked at Mike, who nodded. Sarah? Daniel answered the phone. Daniel, thank God you answered the phone. I just got your text. What happened? Did someone actually break into our house? Sarah's voice sounded worried, but Daniel noticed the complete absence of hospital noises in the background. No radio calls, no beeping of machines, no hurried footsteps. If she really did work in a hospital emergency room, there would have been those sounds. Yes, Daniel said. Alex spotted someone in the backyard, and then we saw someone trying to get into the house. We got out safely, and the police are on it. Oh gosh, Sarah said. I'm going home right now. No, Daniel said more firmly than he expected. The police said we shouldn't go home until they finish their investigation. We'll spend the night at Mike's. There was a moment of silence on the other side of the phone. Then Sarah said, well, if you think it's safer. I love you guys. I love you too, Daniel replied. But the words felt strange in his mouth. When the call ended, Mike looked at Daniel. What did you notice? It's too quiet in the background. If she was actually in the hospital, there would have been more noise. And she agreed too quickly with our decision not to go home. Normally, she would have insisted on coming back immediately to make sure we were safe. And Alex spoke up suddenly, surprising both adults. Mom's been lying the last few weeks. Daniel turned to his son. What do you mean, buddy? She said she went to work, but I saw her car at the shopping center when I was at school. She said she was at the hospital, but she smelled like men's perfume. And she started locking her cell phone, which she never did before. Daniel felt his heart sink. 8-year-old Alex had noticed all the warning signs Daniel had ignored. Children were always better at observing subtle changes than adults because they hadn't yet learned to ignore uncomfortable truths. What else, Alex? Daniel asked softly. Yesterday, I heard her on the phone in the garage. She thought I was in the house, but I forgot my basketball. She said to someone Daniel will be out of town on Friday, and we can go ahead as planned. Daniel's blood turned cold. Tomorrow was Friday, and he did plan to drive to Dallas for an architectural and engineering conference. It wasn't secret information, but Sarah seemed to be passing it on to people she shouldn't be discussing Daniel's trip with. Mike looked at Daniel's expression. You're going out of town tomorrow? Yes, to Dallas for a meeting. But right now I'm not sure I should go. Maybe you should go, Mike said thoughtfully, but in an unexpected way. See what happens. Daniel understood what Mike was implying. If Sarah really was planning something, making her think the plan was going as expected might reveal the truth. But it also meant taking a risk, especially without knowing her motives or who her accomplices were. I need more information, Daniel said, before I make any decisions. We can help you get that information, Mike said, but you have to be prepared to face answers you may not like. Daniel looked at his sleeping daughter and his son, who was listening intently to the adult conversation. Whatever Sarah was doing, whatever her motives, his first priority was to protect these two children. If that meant revealing their mother's secrets, so be it. Tell me what you're thinking, Daniel said to Mike. Tomorrow you go out of town as planned, but you actually stay in the neighborhood and observe. We'll install some surveillance equipment in the house and see what happens after you leave. In the meantime, we investigate Sarah's recent activities and see what we can find out. Daniel nodded. It was a reasonable plan, but he knew that once he started down this path, there was no turning back. If he found out that Sarah had actually betrayed their marriage or worse was involved in something dangerous, he would have to decide what to do with the information. Okay, Daniel finally said, we do this. But the kids' safety is priority number one. If things get dangerous, I'll take them out immediately. Sure, Mike agreed. Alex, would you like to continue to help us observe? You've done a great job already. Alex nodded gravely. I'll help if it protects our family. Daniel was proud of his son's maturity and heartbroken that the 8-year-old had to deal with this situation. No child should have to doubt their mother, but Alex already knew in his gut that something wasn't right. Daniel barely slept that night. He lay on the bed in Mike's guest room, thinking about all the signs he might have missed over the past few months. Sarah's change in work hours, her new protectiveness over her cell phone, her recent purchase of new clothes, and the fact that she always seemed to have an excuse for not attending family events. All of these may have innocuous explanations on their own, but taken together, they paint a worrying picture. Daniel begins to question everything he thinks he knows about his wife. The next morning, Daniel begins their strategy as planned. He announces to Sarah that he will be traveling to Dallas as planned and will be spending the night there. Sarah's reaction was supportive, almost encouraging, in contrast to the worry she usually felt about him when he traveled. "Have fun," she said and kissed his cheek, "and don't miss us too much." The response unnerved Daniel. Normally, Sarah would have worried about his safety on the drive, would have had him text as soon as he arrived, and would have planned things they would do together when he returned. This relaxed attitude was very out of character for her. Mike had already installed several small cameras the night before, disguised as ordinary household items. They would record activity inside and outside the house and transmit the footage to Mike's surveillance system. Daniel leaves for Dallas, but in reality, he just drives around town and parks at a vantage point a few blocks from his house. From there, he could observe any vehicles approaching the house while staying far enough away to avoid detection. Around 10 a.m., Daniel saw a dark blue sedan he didn't recognize pull up in his driveway. A tall man got out of the car, and Daniel recognized him as the man who had tried to break into his house the night before. But this time, Sarah came out to greet him, and the way they embraced was definitely not a hug between friends or work colleagues. Daniel's heart sinks to the bottom. He'd been hoping for a harmless explanation, that his suspicions were wrong. But seeing Sarah's intimacy with this strange man was an agonizing answer to all his doubts. His wife is having an affair, but that's not the worst part. As Daniel continues to watch, he sees the man pull a large bag out of his car that appears to contain something heavy. Together they bring the bag into the house, which makes Daniel wonder what they're planning. Mike radioed Daniel. "Did you see it?" "Saw it." Confirmation that Sarah is in an inappropriate relationship with an unknown male. "They just brought something into the house. I saw it from the camera. The bag looked like it contained tools or equipment. What do you think they were planning?" Daniel remembered the cryptic entries in Sarah's notebook, especially the D out, M in. Final entry. Now that M was clearly referring to the mystery man, the meaning of final became even more worrisome. "I'm not sure, but I don't like this. They obviously planned something and timed it to coincide with my departure." Daniel's cell phone vibrated, displaying a text message from Sarah. "Arrived safely?" The message confirms that Sarah thinks he's left town. Daniel replies, "Yes, just arrived at the hotel. Meeting starts tomorrow." "Okay, love you. Might go to bed early tonight. I'm tired from last night." Daniel stared at the message, barely able to believe Sarah's hypocrisy. She claimed that the fatigue came from a traumatic experience the night before, when in fact she was with the person who caused it. The afternoon passes slowly as Daniel maintains his surveillance. At about 3 p.m., the man leaves the house, but he doesn't take the bag he brought with him that morning. Sarah walked him to the door, and they hugged again before he drove off. Daniel waits for an hour to make sure the man doesn't return, then he decides to take more direct action. He calls Sarah. "Hi, honey," Sarah said when she answered the phone. "How was the meeting?" "It hasn't started yet. It's not until tomorrow," Daniel said. "I just realized that I forgot some of my important papers. I need to come back and get them." There was a noticeable silence on the other side of the phone. Then Sarah said, "Oh, are you sure you can't live without them? Or I could scan and email them to you." Sarah had never offered this kind of technological help before. Her fear of computers and scanners was part of a family joke. The fact that she offered to do this just to keep Daniel from coming home further confirmed the fact that she was hiding something. "No, I need the originals," Daniel insisted. "I'll be home in about an hour." "Okay," Sarah said, but her voice sounded nervous. "I might not be home. I promised Jennifer I'd go shopping with me." Another lie. Daniel could see from the security cameras that Sarah was still in the house, and that Jennifer was an imaginary friend that Sarah was using to cover her unexplained absence. "It's okay," Daniel says. "I have a key." After the call ended, Daniel observed that Sarah immediately began to bustle around the house. Through the window, he could see her moving items around quickly, apparently hiding evidence of something. Daniel drove home, ready to confront whatever he would find. As he pulls into the driveway, he notices that Sarah's car is still in the garage, even though she claims to be going shopping. He opened the front door with his key and loudly announced, "Sarah? I'm home." There was no answer. The house feels quiet, but Daniel knows that Sarah is home because he just saw her moving around the window. Daniel begins to systematically search the house for anything out of the ordinary. In the master bedroom, he finds that the bed has been rearranged, but not organized carefully enough. Under the mattress, he finds the bag the mystery man brought with him that morning. The bag contains items that shock Daniel: rope, duct tape, some vials of what looks like anesthetic, and a few other items that Daniel doesn't want to scrutinize. This is not simply evidence of an affair. These items hint at a more sinister plan. Daniel hears the garage door open and then a car engine start. Through the window, he sees Sarah leaving in a hurry, apparently deciding to actually go shopping rather than face Daniel's unexpected return. But she left the bag behind, which was either a mistake or she thought Daniel wouldn't find it. Either way, Daniel now has hard evidence that some kind of threat against him is being planned. Daniel takes pictures of the contents of the bag and then carefully puts everything back in its place. He doesn't want Sarah to know what he's found, at least not yet. He needed more information to understand the full plan, and more importantly, he needed to make sure his children were safe. He called Mike. "I found something. We need to talk." "Did she see you?" "No, she left." "But Mike, this is more serious than I thought." As Daniel leaves the house, he realizes that his life has changed forever. Whatever Sarah is planning, whatever her motives, she has crossed a line from which there is no turning back. The question now is not whether to take action, but what action to take to protect himself and his children. Later that night, when Daniel returns to Mike's house and shows him the photographs, both brothers realize that the gravity of the situation is far greater than they had anticipated. Mike immediately contacted some of his friends in the legal community and began preparing for the upcoming battle. "We need to build a complete case," Mike said, "not just to protect you, but to make sure you get custody of the kids." Daniel knew Mike was right. This was no longer just about discovering his wife's infidelity. It was about protecting their family from a dangerous man who was clearly willing to use violence. Over the next few days, Daniel, Mike, and Alex formed an unexpected investigative team. Alex continues to provide detailed observations of Sarah's behavior. Mike uses his technical skills and military contacts to gather information, and Daniel coordinates the overall strategy. They discover that Sarah's pattern of behavior is more complex and dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Not only was she having an affair, she was actively involved in a complex scheme involving identity theft, insurance fraud, and possible bodily harm. Daniel spends the next week putting his military training and strategic thinking squarely on the line in a battle like no other. It's not about facing the enemy on the battlefield, but finding out in his own home that those closest to him have become a threat. But Daniel soon realizes that the battle will require not force, but wisdom, patience, and precise planning. Mike has contacted one of his friends, private investigator Jennifer Cole, a former FBI agent. Cole came to Mike's house Tuesday morning for a full debriefing. "This is one of the most complex cases of domestic betrayal I've ever seen," Cole said after reviewing all the evidence. "The information you've gathered suggests that this was more than just an affair, but an elaborate criminal conspiracy." Daniel sat at the dining room table with all the evidence he'd collected over the past few days in front of him: photos, audio recordings, timeline analysis, financial records. "I need to know exactly what they're planning and how I can protect my children. First, we need to identify the man," Cole said, "and then we need to know their complete plan. Based on the items you found and Sarah's pattern of behavior, I suspect they were planning some form of kidnapping or worse." Alex looked up from his schoolwork. "I can help identify the man. I remember part of his license plate number." Daniel was once again astounded by his son's powers of observation. "What do you remember?" "TXG, 7 and then 2 numbers, but I didn't see them." His car was a dark blue Chevy Cruze with a small dent in the front. Cole recorded the information. "It was enough for us to find him. Texas DMV records will show a match, and then we can identify the owner." As Cole begins her investigation, Daniel decides to implement a riskier but potentially more effective strategy. He would convince Sarah that he was completely unaware of her plans while setting up traps to document her criminal activity. "I'm going to go home," Daniel tells Mike, "and act like nothing happened." "It's too dangerous," Mike protests, "if they're actually planning to hurt you." "That's why I need to take control of the situation," Daniel interrupted. "If I hide here, they might change their plans or become more careful. But if I act normal, they may continue to expose themselves." Alex looked at his father. I want to go back and help you, Dad. No, buddy. It's safer for you and Emma to stay here. Uncle Mike will take care of you. Daniel knew it was the right thing to do to keep the children away from possible danger, but he also knew that Alex's observation skills could be invaluable. They reached a compromise. Alex would come home during school hours, but remain with Mike at night. When Daniel arrives home, Sarah acts as if nothing has happened. She asks him about his trip to Dallas, talks about what she did while he was away, and even complains about some of the minor problems in the house. Her performance was almost perfect. I'm so glad you're home safe, Sarah said and hugged him. The house just wouldn't be the same without you. The intimacy made Daniel cringe, but he forced himself to keep his reaction normal. He needed Sarah to believe that he didn't suspect anything. I missed here too, Daniel replied. Where are the kids? Alex is spending the night at Mike's and Emma is at my mom's. I thought we could have a quiet night, just the two of us. Daniel noticed how Sarah had arranged for the kids to be out of the house. It wasn't a coincidence. That night, Daniel installed his own surveillance equipment in the house, more sophisticated than what Mike had installed before. He used small military-grade cameras and audio equipment capable of recording high-quality video and audio evidence. The next day, Cole called to report her findings. I found the man. Marcus Reed, age 37, has a violent criminal record. He was convicted of armed robbery and assault and was just released from a Texas prison 8 months ago. This information chilled Daniel's blood. Not only was Sarah having an affair, she was associated with a felon with a history of violence. There's more, Cole continued. He's currently living in a motel outside of town, but he's been going to all sorts of strange places on a regular basis for the past 2 months. Hardware stores, chemical supply stores, even a store that specializes in surveillance equipment. He's preparing for something, Daniel said. And the question is what? I suggest we put him under full surveillance, Cole said. In the meantime, you need to start documenting all of Sarah's suspicious activity. We need to build a case that's acceptable in court. Daniel agreed to the plan, but he also began to develop his own strategy. He wanted to make sure that whatever Sarah and Reed were planning, they would pay for it to the fullest extent of the law. Over the next few days, Daniel acts completely normal, but he's actually running a sophisticated counterintelligence operation. He installs recording devices in every room of the house, places a GPS tracker in Sarah's car, and even places a small hair trigger in the bottom of the coffee mugs she regularly uses. Sarah's behavior becomes increasingly suspicious. She began to receive more work, calls that required her to be outside the house. Her hours became unpredictable, and she often claimed to be working overtime or attending training. But Daniel's surveillance equipment revealed the truth. Sarah wasn't working overtime at the hospital. She was meeting with Reed to discuss their plans in detail. Daniel first heard the full conversation on Thursday night. Sarah thought Daniel was upstairs sleeping when she took a call from the kitchen. Is everything ready? Sarah whispered. Reed's voice came through the phone. Yes. We have ropes, contraband to render him unconscious, and vehicles for transportation. What about the schedule? This weekend. Are you sure he'll be at the gym at his usual time? Yes. He goes every Saturday morning at 8. Never changes the routine. Daniel felt mixed emotions of anger and fear as he heard those words. Not only were they planning to kidnap him, they had studied his personal habits to ensure the success of their plan. What happens after the kidnapping? Sarah asked. We do what we discussed. Make it look like an accident, and then you apply for the insurance money. No one will suspect anything. Daniel could hardly believe what he was hearing. Not only had his wife betrayed him, she was actively involved in a plot to plan his murder. But now Daniel had the proof he needed. This recording, combined with the other evidence he's gathered, is enough to expose Sarah and Reed to serious criminal charges. Daniel immediately contacted Cole and his attorney, Thomas Gray. They reviewed the new evidence in an emergency meeting. This changes everything, Gray said. Now we have clear evidence of premeditated murder. You need to contact the police immediately. Agreed, Cole added. But we need to handle this carefully. You want Sarah and Reed arrested before they can destroy the evidence or escape. Daniel had a different idea. I want more. I don't just want to stop their plans. I want to make sure they pay the maximum price for trying to destroy our family. What do you mean? Gray asked cautiously. I mean, we let them think their plan worked, Daniel said. And then when they start applying for insurance and dealing with my death, we catch them with fraud. Cole frowned. That's dangerous, Daniel. If anything goes wrong. More dangerous than waiting for them to actually try to kill me? Daniel countered. At least this way we control the whole situation. Gray thought for a moment. That could actually work. If we can convince Sarah that you're dead and she starts applying for insurance, that's a clear case of fraud. Combined with the evidence of premeditation, we'd have a strong case that could ensure she gets the longest prison sentence possible. But we need the full cooperation of the police, says Cole. And this operation must be formalized to ensure that all evidence is admissible in court. Daniel contacted a detective he knew, Mark Thompson, who had served in Daniel's military reserve unit. Thompson was shocked but agreed to help after hearing Daniel's story and the plan he wanted. This is the most complex domestic crime case I've encountered in my career, Thompson said. But given the severity of the threat and the evidence you already have, I think we can make it work. The plan was extremely complex but elaborate. Daniel would pretend to go to the gym as part of his normal routine, but in reality, he would meet the police there and then move to a secure location. At the same time, the police would work with the local media to create a fake news story about Daniel's accidental death in the gym parking lot. To make the plan even more convincing, they even arranged for an ambulance to arrive at the scene, took pictures of Daniel being carried away on a stretcher. He wasn't actually injured, of course, and made sure that these images would appear on the local news. We'll be monitoring Sarah's every reaction, Thompson says. If she really thinks you're dead, her behavior will reveal her true character and provide us with more evidence. The hardest part was dealing with the kids. Daniel didn't want Alex and Emma to go through the trauma of thinking their father was dead, even temporarily. After much deliberation, they decided to keep Alex in the loop about the basic plan, but keep Emma a secret until it was all over. It's complicated, buddy, Daniel explained to Alex, but it's the best way to keep our family safe. Alex accepted the explanation with his amazing maturity. I understand, Dad. We need to make Mom think she's succeeding, so she'll do things that reveal her true character. Daniel was amazed and proud of his son's understanding. Alex not only understood the need for the plan, he understood the moral complexity of it. The Saturday morning the plan was implemented, Daniel went through his normal morning routine. He kissed Sarah goodbye and told her he was going to the gym and would be back in 2 hours. Be careful, Sarah said, but Daniel noticed a strange gleam in her eyes, almost like anticipation. After Daniel left, he drove straight to the gym, where he met with Thompson and several other officers. They quickly executed a false accident scene setup, took the necessary photographs and video, and then Daniel was transferred to a police safe house. From the safe house, Daniel was able to watch Sarah's reaction to the bad news through the surveillance equipment he had installed. At 1 p.m., Thompson called Sarah as planned. Daniel watches her reaction to the call through a hidden camera. At first, Sarah is suitably shocked. No, that's impossible. Daniel is a careful man. He wouldn't have an accident in a parking lot. But Daniel noticed certain key elements missing from her reaction. She didn't immediately ask to go to the hospital, didn't ask about the children, and didn't display the hysteria he expected to see from a woman who had just lost her husband. Instead, a few minutes after Thompson hung up, Sarah immediately dialed another number. It happened, she told the person on the other end of the line. Sooner than we expected, but it happened. The cop said it looked like an accident. Daniel felt angrier than ever when he heard those words. Not only was his wife not mourning his death, she was actually celebrating with his killer. The next few hours were emotionally torturous for Daniel. He was forced to watch Sarah perform the role of the grieving widow, all the while knowing that she was celebrating on the inside. She cries the right tears and says the right things when neighbors come to offer their condolences. But when she thinks no one is watching, her behavior is completely different. The most heartbreaking moment was when Sarah told the children that their father had died. Alex's reaction was perfect, showing the proper amount of grief while carefully observing his mother's behavior. But Emma is too young to fully comprehend what's happening. Mommy, when is Daddy coming home? Emma asked. Daddy's not coming home, baby, Sarah replied. But her tone was uncharacteristically calm and lacked the tremor expected of a truly grieving mother. Later that night, when the kids are asleep, Reed comes to the house. Daniel watches their meeting through the security cameras, every second deepening his understanding of Sarah's betrayal. We did it, Reed says, hugging Sarah. No one will ever suspect anything. Now we need to wait a while, and then you can start applying for insurance. I know the timetable, Sarah replied. I've looked into it. It usually takes about a week to wait, and then I can start the process. What about the kids? Reed asked, a question that made Daniel's heart almost stop beating. Sarah paused for a moment, then said what was probably the most shocking thing Daniel had ever heard. I'm still considering my options. Maybe my mother could take care of them long term. The kids will be a burden when we start our new life. Daniel could hardly believe what he was hearing. Not only had Sarah killed him, she was planning to abandon their children to start a new life with her lover. The next day, Sarah began her new role as the grieving widow. She contacts Daniel's employer, insurance company, and bank to inform them of Daniel's death. Her performance was professional, filled with appropriate emotion and sadness. But Daniel and the police team document her every action. When Sarah began the process of applying for Daniel's life insurance, she filled out detailed forms claiming to be unaware of any health problems or risky behavior on Daniel's part that could have contributed to his death. When the insurance investigator asked her if she knew of anyone who might want to harm Daniel, Sarah replied without hesitation, no. Everyone loved Daniel. He had no enemies. This answer is particularly ironic, considering that Sarah herself has been planning to kill him. 3 days later, Sarah does something that completely enrages Daniel. She starts creating a profile on an online dating site. She claims to be a recently widowed mom looking for a new start. Cole discovered this while monitoring Sarah's online activity. She hasn't even waited for your funeral to start looking for a new man. Of course, this was just a way to cover up her relationship with Reed. A week later, when Sarah submits a complete insurance application and begins contacting realtors to prepare the house for sale, the police decide it's time to take action. Daniel was watching from the safe house when Thompson and several other officers arrived at the front door. He'd been waiting for this moment for a long time, but he still felt a complicated mix of emotions when he saw it actually happen. Sarah's face immediately turned white as she opened the door. She knew the game was over. Sarah Mitchell Callahan, you are under arrest for insurance fraud, premeditated murder conspiracy, and multiple related charges. Sarah's first reaction was not confusion or denial, but panic. I don't know what you're talking about. My husband died in an accident. No, he didn't, Thompson said. Daniel Callahan is very much alive, and we have detailed evidence that you and Marcus Reed planned to murder him. As Sarah was handcuffed, she looked around for an escape route. But when she realized there was no way out, her expression changed from panic to anger. It's a trap. You can't do this. I have rights. Actually, when someone tries to commit murder, your rights are very limited, Thompson replied. Reed was arrested at his motel around the same time. His attempts to resist and attack the arresting officer only added more offenses to his list of charges. Daniel's heart wells up not with satisfaction, but with deep sadness as he watches his wife being taken away. This woman he once loved, the mother of his children, had become someone he didn't recognize at all. But he also felt a sense of relief, knowing that the threat was finally over. Both Sarah and Reed were denied bail after prosecutors successfully argued that they were flight risks and a threat to public safety. While in custody, more evidence surfaced, revealing more details of their plan. During a search of Reed's motel room, police found a detailed plan for an accident, including how to cause what appeared to be a fatal crash in the gym parking lot. They also found Sarah's bank account information, which showed that she had already begun transferring funds into Reed's name. The most shocking discovery was a handwritten timeline detailing every step from Daniel's death to Sarah and Reed's departure from Texas to start a new life. They planned to disappear as soon as the insurance money arrived, leaving Alex and Emma in the care of Sarah's mother. The trial proceeded quickly, largely because of the overwhelming quality of the evidence. The audio and video evidence provided by Daniel, combined with police surveillance records, provided prosecutors with an impeccable case. In court, Sarah's attorneys attempted to present several different defense strategies. First, they claimed that Sarah was coerced by Reed and was a victim rather than an accomplice. But Daniel's recordings clearly show that Sarah was the primary planner, providing detailed information about Daniel's habits and actively participating in every aspect of the plan. They then try to claim that the whole thing was a role-playing game, and that Sarah and Reed never really intended to hurt anyone. But this argument falls apart in the face of the actual weapons and chemicals Reed purchased to carry out the plan. Finally, the defense attorney tries to shift the focus to Daniel's deceptive investigative methods, claiming that his surveillance was illegal and that the evidence should have been excluded. But Gray successfully argued that Daniel had a right as a homeowner to install surveillance equipment on his property, especially when he had reason to believe that criminal activity was taking place. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. Sarah was found guilty of all charges, including premeditated murder conspiracy, insurance fraud, perjury, and endangering the welfare of a child. At sentencing, Judge Patricia Chan spoke directly to Sarah. This court has seen many painful cases, but few as coldly calculated as your behavior. Not only did you betray your marriage vows, not only did you attempt to murder the father of your children, you planned to abandon these innocent children to pursue your selfish desires. Sarah was sentenced to 25 years in prison without parole. Reed received a 30-year sentence because he had a prior violent crime conviction. Daniel was granted full custody of Alex and Emma. The court found Sarah completely unfit for any kind of visitation, considering her demonstrated willingness to harm or even kill family members for personal gain. In the months following the trial, Daniel focused on establishing a new normal for his children. They moved to a different part of Austin, away from the house of painful memories, but close enough for Alex to continue attending the same school. Emma adapts relatively easily, partly because she's too young to fully understand what's going on. When she asks about her mom, Daniel tells her an age-appropriate version of the truth. Mom made bad choices and can't be with them now. The way Alex handles the situation continues to amaze Daniel. He never expressed a desire to see Sarah, and when others asked how he felt, he would simply say, "She chose not to be part of our family." Daniel began seeing a psychotherapist, not only for himself, but also to help his children deal with the trauma they were experiencing. Dr. Lisa Roberts, who specializes in family trauma, helps them understand the complex emotions of betrayal. It's important to remember, Dr. Roberts told Daniel in a session, Sarah's behavior is not a reflection on you, but on her own character. You and the children are victims of her choices, but you are also survivors. Daniel began to reconstruct his life to focus on being the father Alex and Emma needed. He cut back on work trips, became more involved in school activities, and made sure they had a steady daily routine. On weekends, they do simple family activities, going to the park, watching movies, or just cooking together at home. Alex often helps take care of Emma, showing a sense of responsibility beyond his years, but Daniel also makes sure he still enjoys his childhood. One day while they were playing at the park, Alex approached Daniel and said, "Dad, I'm glad we're safe." "Me too, buddy," Daniel replies, hugging his son. Emma runs over from the swing set to join the hug. "We're the best family ever," she declared. Daniel looks at his 2 children and realizes that despite the trauma they have experienced, they are still capable of being happy, trusting, and loving. Instead of destroying them, Sarah's betrayal had made them stronger and more united. A few months later, Daniel receives a letter from the prison. Sarah wanted to see him and the children. In the letter, she claimed she was sorry, wanted to explain her behavior, and asked for a chance to be a part of the children's lives. Daniel reads the letter once and then tears it up. There's nothing Sarah can say that will change what she's done, no reason to reopen wounds that are finally starting to heal. Alex saw him throw the letter away. "Did Mom write that?" "Yes." "Don't you want to see her?" Daniel considered how to answer. He wanted to be honest with his son, but he also wanted to protect him from unnecessary pain. "Some choices have permanent consequences," Daniel finally said. "Your mom made her choice, and now we're making ours. We're choosing to look forward, not backward." Alex nodded, seeming to understand the explanation. They never talked about the letter or the possibility of visiting Sarah again. A year later, Daniel received an unexpected phone call. Detective Thompson told him that Reed had been attacked by other inmates at the prison and was in serious condition. Sarah, on the other hand, had been transferred to a stricter facility for inappropriate behavior in prison. "I thought you should know," Thompson said, "but it won't affect their sentence or your custody." Daniel thanked Thompson for the information, but realized he had little emotional reaction to the news. Sarah and Reed had become part of his past life. That night, as Daniel was eating dinner with the kids, Emma suddenly asked, "Daddy, can we go to the zoo tomorrow?" "Sure, princess. We can be there all weekend." Alex looked up at his father. That would be a great family trip. Daniel smiled at his children. Emma clapped her little hands excitedly, and Alex was already planning the animals they would see. Outside, the setting sun poured through the window onto the dining room table, illuminating the faces of all three. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.